Hi, everybody. Welcome to On the DL. Today, my guest is Ralph Benmergui, probably best known as a TV and radio personality, very well known, as a matter of fact, in Canada. He began his career in radio at the CBC and moved into TV, where he hosted several different shows, namely CBC Midday with Valerie Pringle, Friday Night with Ralph Benmergui, and of course, Benmergui Live. He's a writer, an ordained spiritual director, and host of his own podcast now, Not That Kind of Rabbi, which I have to tell you, Ralph, I'm a little obsessed with. I thought I heard the name of the podcast and I thought, okay, what about this podcast would at all be endearing or even remotely interesting to me? And I'm hooked.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Do you love doing it?
Yeah, I do. The podcast world is kind of the Wild West in terms of, monetization and all those sort of factors. But in terms of just really being able to talk to people through a spiritual lens, because a lot of people will say, hey, don't get, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual. And they don't really talk about their spiritual lives publicly very much. So when you get someone into that conversation, sometimes I think the guests themselves are a little surprised by by the feeling they have of vulnerability, because they're talking about something that's not surfacey or obvious or material, their career or, politics on the sports level that politics often is and all those things. But instead, they're really talking about their personal journey and how they've navigated that journey. So I find the conversations often leave me feeling really up when I'm finished.
Yeah, that's how I feel when I'm listening to the podcast. I walk a ton every day. That's part of my meditation. I call it walking meditation. And I've just in the last few months started to listen to podcasts as opposed to music, because music wasn't bringing me into that headspace that I needed. But I've been listening to you and I've loved it. And I have to say, there's on so many levels why I feel so inspired by your career and your life story. I love the idea that you continue to stay present, that you celebrate who you are and what you want to give to this world, and you're current, and you're taking all of your gifts. I like to call it the gifts of gab, but some people don't like to call it that. But your gifts and the art of interviewing, and you're marrying that with a very current platform and continuing to work. And I love that. And that's very inspirational for me as someone who also created, quote, their next chapter. I left my cushy, very lovely job just over a year ago as well, wanting to find that thing, that next thing that was going to fill me up. And here I am listening to you, reading about your journey, and I feel incredibly inspired by it. So maybe you
That's
can.
lovely.
Yeah, it's true. It's very true. I only speak raw and real here on the DL. So you can ask me whatever you want right back. But yeah, I feel very inspired. So maybe you can tell me a little bit why you made some of the decisions you've made.
Well, some of the decisions are, I always ask people, if you looked back 3 years from this moment, would you tell me this is where you would be? That I'd be on a Zoom call with Dana Levinson talking about a podcast I do? And the answer to all of it would have been no. How would that have happened? Like, how do you connect those dots? So it's sort of like the, if you want to make God laugh, tell her your plans kind of approach to
Did you say
things.
tell her?
Yes.
Oh, Ralph, I like you even more.
But I would also add that her, he, all of that, the anthropomorphic, what is the word? I can't even remember it anymore. Anthropomorphication, the
I'll have you say
Disneying.
that.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
Disneying of God is something that we have to be aware of. Like yesterday, uh, the day before we actually taped this, was Yom Kippur, the highest holiday in the Jewish calendar, and the Day of Atonement. And
Ralph, I'm part of the tribe.
indeed. And in that Day of Atonement, the moment can be perceived as a transaction between you and this God who's thinking, I wonder how Dana did this year. Or it can be an immersion in it. The other part of the text is really much more about the idea that you are in a position of humility in life, that this is not your show, that you're just stardust having to pass through this particular incarnation of who you are, but that's not the real work that's being done. That's the surface stuff. Underneath it is being part of something that is so unbelievable, so unknowable, that the most you can do is be respectful of the fact that you're just a blink of an eye in the eye of God. That God is about eternal, constant creation, and you are just a part of it. And your decision, and I say it in the podcast, is to decide for yourself: am I going to be a cancerous cell in the body of all this, or am I going to be a healthy cell? And I know that you and I have both been in the news, current affairs, TV show, world, and I don't know about you, but there were times for me where it was just thinking I'm more a part of a problem than a solution to any of it, because really I'm just throwing logs on fires, and
Yeah.
I worked in politics on both sides as a reporter or as a journalist, and also in a minister's office, and watching the daily scrum of reporters was just like watching kids in a schoolyard in a circle yelling, fight, fight, fight.
Yeah, I have to tell you, even from day one, I hated scrums. I hated scrums because I was first and foremost afraid what was going to happen to my toes. I was afraid I'd be stomped on. I was always the smallest, shortest one there, and I was really afraid. And I also just hated the vibe of yelling at somebody. I hated throwing my microphone in this swarm of people and just yelling at someone. So I hated scrums, and I made that very clear. But of course, that was a huge part of my job. So when I didn't have to attend to scrum, I was very happy. When you said the word scrum, I just got the chills.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
I didn't
No,
like it.
it's, it's really being aware that there's so many different ways we can approach this life.
But
And
why did you choose, how did you go from, I mean, obviously it's a long journey, but how did you go from CBC to
mhm.
probably one of the most revered journalists, TV hosts in the country, to a spiritual leader who moved out of the city of Toronto to where you are right now? I know this was a long journey, but how did you get from that?
Yeah, I mean, in broad terms, it's kind of part of a fabric of deciding as you get older and more move into different things, that there were other challenges I wanted. I went and I'd always wanted to work in politics to see if I could make any kind of a difference. But
Wow.
but also the yearning to have a more meaningful life, and not one that was based on outward signs of success or failure. I had done a TV show. I'd done 4 or 5 TV shows and radio programs and current affairs and variety, and I had a great time at the CBC. It was like being in a candy store.
A
But
great career, incredible
yeah,
career.
but
Incredible.
one of the shows, the Friday night show, was one
Yeah.
where I had a horrible time, where people were saying the most horrible things about me all the time, and I had to find my center in that. And I remember the thing I took refuge in was meditation and Buddhist philosophy. Um, there's a movement in the world of Jubus, Jewish Buddhists, because it's, for some reason, it aligns very well. So many of the major movers and shakers of Buddhism in North America, for instance, are Jews. Um, and there's a lot in there about the mystical part of the journey. And that's what really started to attract me, was the rational part of religion is always trying to tell you that, okay, here's the rules, here's how you do it, and this is when
Mhm.
you're going to do it.
Mhm.
And there's something to be said for that kind of consistency and structure. But the other part of it is accepting that half of what your life is about is just mystery. No idea why it happened, no idea what you're supposed to do with it. no idea what's going on. Like look into a Hubble telescope image and just think, how could I possibly know what's going on here? There's millions of galaxies, literally millions of galaxies, forget stars, galaxies, which have
Is
millions of stars, right?
is that your recommendation to anybody who is going through change, looking for something more, looking for the next chapter? The idea of, I don't know if I like the word giving in, but um, accepting the idea that there is a mystery to our life, that we can't always know how it's going to unfold and where
Yeah.
we're going to be.
So you've got to be able to be present. This is the only thing that we have. The past is a collage of things that may have happened. If you're put under a microscope, that part of your life, did you say exactly that 17 years ago? Did that person do exactly this when you said that? No. They're a narrative we patch together that reinforces the idea that we are who we are. I am Dana, and Dana doesn't drink Chardonnay. Dana only drinks Malbec, and all these
How did
silly
you know
notions.
that?
All these silly notions we have of being solid, of
Hmm.
that nothing will ever change. But I think if you accept that everything is change, it's easier to change career paths. It's easier to pursue things without thinking, I'm not allowed to do that. I'm not supposed to stop doing a job that everybody else thinks is a great job. You have to, you had a good job. You said it was a wonderful job. You
Wonderful.
had it going. You could have kept going,
Yep.
but something in you said, it's time to move on. And
You
instead
know,
of denying it, you
people
listen
thought
to it.
people thought I was so bananas. Even even Mike, our producer, Mike Boone, would attest to this. He like just grilled me the first time we spoke and we had an interview. Nobody could wrap their head around the idea that I, after 20 years, leaving such a plum position, such a high profile position, with money and prestige and all of that, I would want to leave. Nobody bought it. Everybody believed I must have been let go. I'm like, I wasn't let go. I'm telling you the truth. And when I told my bosses that was the response that I was getting, they were like, that's ridiculous. We should say something. I said, no, don't worry. I can handle it. I'm a big girl. But it was so crazy that people thought it was, I must have had some kind of midlife crisis. Something must have exploded in my brain to have made me want to walk away. And I said, it's very much like divorce. You don't just wake up in the morning and decide to leave a position after 20 years. It's a journey, it's a
Right.
process. Sometimes it's years in the making. But I will tell you, I did talk to my rabbi several times. I did go and speak with him about it because I was trying to find that spiritual meaning behind what is going on for me. What am I doing? Like, I didn't want to seek a therapist or a psychiatrist. I didn't want to hear all of that. I needed to find something much more meaningful. That's why when I hear you speak and the idea that you went from the crazy world of television and journalism, broadcasting, because it is a crazy world, to a very spiritual life and giving back on a platform that is, I guess, considered broadcast, but in a different way, to me is absolutely, it's so inspirational and intriguing. So I love it. I love it.
Here's the thing for me. I really appreciate everything you're saying. I'm listening to your journey and what voice was calling to you inside you over those period of years. What is it that you weren't going to get from what you already were doing?
I felt, I felt in a way I felt very unfulfilled. Felt that I had a plan and that the plan it really went a different way. So it's like I say to people, it was as if I was driving on the 401 and then it's a highway here in Ontario, and I'm driving, and all of a sudden I'm on a different highway, and I have no idea how I got on that highway and why I'm on that highway, but I'm on it and it's full speed. But I just didn't feel happy,
Were there
and I
any
did.
life changes that triggered that? Anything in your
Yes, of course. Yes, a very chaotic, very painful divorce when I had two very, very young children, a 1 and 4-year-old at the time. And I had to make changes with my career um, at CTV because I wanted to stay. So I had to figure out a way where I could do it all. Because as you know, you have these crazy schedules and you're on call almost 24/7. And it really is a 7-day week thing when you're in news. And so I had to find a shift where it was more set and settled. And so I was asked to take on a role on the weekend, and I thought it was going to be temporary, and it ended up being 9 years later, which, that sort of all combined into my 20-year experience there. And while I was doing it, I was grateful that I was still at a place that I loved, still doing work that I loved, but I wasn't feeling fulfilled, that I had just really steered a different way.
So what was missing?
This connection with people, communicating, being able to hear people's stories in depth, being able to tell people's stories in a way that I wasn't being allowed to do. It felt like news became so disco-like. It was like soundbite, sound up, it's over. It was like 10 seconds here, 10 seconds there. We go live here, we go live there. I went, well, that's fantastic, for that ADHD brain. But for me, I love the connection with people, and I wanted to connect, and I couldn't do that in that network, and for sure on their platforms. And so I left very respectfully and with wonderful relationships. But that's where I finally got to when I had to make my exit. That's my story.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think for a lot of people, it's about wanting to have a more substantial life or a more meaningful thing to do. And a lot of people say, well, when I retire, I'll get, in a few years, and you never know if you're going to get those few years or if you're going to get to retirement. But I guess the other part of it, it sounds to me like it's about, that you use that word midlife crisis, and that's something that has been used. It's kind of been weaponized as a phrase, right?
For sure.
Because it's like, oh, you mean you want to go get a sports car, or you're going to become trivial, and you're dying to be young again. But really, it's a passage. It's like a 13 or 12-year-old in Judaism gets a bar mitzvah or a bat mitzvah. But in our own lives, there are times where we move into another season. And there is, for me, I'm definitely in autumn, and firmly ensconced, with leaves falling everywhere, and it's all fine.
Why for you? Why
Well, I mean, I'm not 40 anymore. I'm in my 60s. So, even if you looked at it numerically, I'm in the autumn of my life. But you can either go in kicking and screaming and decide that, you're going to continue to try to look young and act young and do young, or you're going to try to find a way to say, what does this offer me that I couldn't get out of the summer of my life? And I certainly can barely remember spring. But what will I get out of this? How do I make it a meaningful journey? And how, in a society that says to you as you get older, you're worth less as a person, right? So if you have somebody you're working with who's in their 60s, nobody's looking to keep them going, even though health-wise we last longer than we ever used to. There's an ageism that says, thank you for your service, we'll see you later.
Why do you think that still exists when there really is so much around the idea that with age is wisdom? It really is true. I feel so much wiser now than I did when I started my career 20 years ago.
Well, because if you look at commercial advertising, a product is constantly they pretend it's new and improved, even though it's a 40, 50-year-old product. New Tide, improved. No one says old and improved.
New day. Just kidding, right?
So you froze at that moment, so I didn't hear it.
Oh, I said new Dana Levinson, new and improved.
Yes, and that's what you're a commodity. We're all commodities in this kind of a society. Now, if you come from another culture, then you can be called an elder. You know, if I walked down the street in Moroccan robes and was like, oh, look, an elder from the Moroccan community. But in our society, we don't value that. We try to figure out how to move you over so the younger person can get the work. And, you know, if you're not willing to. So when you see a job description now, there's about 40 things you're supposed to be good at, and willing to work some nights and weekends, and give 130% to your job. So they're not looking for someone who has wisdom. They're looking for somebody who has adrenaline, and they'll squeeze that for as long as they possibly can.
That just happened to me yesterday. I get these job alerts, not through LinkedIn, through something else. And they were looking for a TV host who, I thought this was the greatest description. Somebody energetic and extremely fit. Okay, well, I'm fit. I'm pretty energetic. I have a couple cups of coffee in the morning. I'm raring to go. And they had to be in their 20s at the latest, at the most in their 30s.
Right.
But
Looking
I thought,
for
well,
a young,
I
diverse,
cannot,
energetic person.
I cannot pass for my 20s. I don't even think I could pass for my 30s either anymore.
Well, here's the thing is in organizations, for instance, there's no mechanism for people even stepping off and leaving. There's no wisdom council for an organization that says, you know, we are all people who are willing to mentor younger people, willing to pass on the wisdom of what we've learned. It's a pizza party and out the door and keep in touch, right? And that's it.
Yeah, I mentor. So, I mean, but I've taken that on myself, right?
Right. Personally, you can do it, but institutionally,
no.
You leave and all your institutional memory and wisdom go with you.
Oh, yes. They're like, bye. It was nice. Thank you for your service. Here's a mug.
Yes.
I got a mug. I'm like, I'm good. I don't even get a watch.
Not anymore. That costs too much.
It was a mug. I'm like, that's very nice. I'll add it to all my CTV
other mugs.
Yeah, that was nice.
Mugs. Yeah.
I thought that was lovely. You have a seminar that you give, and I hope I'm saying this properly. Aging and saging. Is that correct?
Yeah, aging to saging workshops.
Aging to saging. Okay, what is that about?
You can get old, or you can grow into your elder years and cultivate your wisdom. Just because you're old, it doesn't mean you're wise. There's lots of stupid old people, and there's lots of stupid young people, because they're, and it's not, stupid's a harsh word. They're just not conscious. They're just kind of going through life, reacting to their lives till the last moment. And this is an attempt to make conscious the idea of getting older, but also you have to take inventory of what your life has been. You have to take stock of yourself, and you have to synthesize that knowledge that you can cull from your life into wisdom. Like there's 3 layers: information, knowledge, and wisdom. In our world now, we're down to just information. A Twitter scroll is just one bit of information after another, none of them connected, and none of them giving you a bigger picture. Kind of the way news operates. Just look at this, and then this happened. This person got stabbed, and then this happened, and then you're finished. That's your day. But none of it was brought together even as knowledge, let alone wisdom. So for a person, there are exercises and things that you can do with people that really kind of animate for them a few different things. One of them is the acceptance that this is just a life. There's a book by Stephen Jenkinson called Die Wise. And in it, he says, the human lifespan is not life. Life goes on before, during, and after your lifespan. So this is just your human life in this moment. And all that you really have is that present moment in that. So given that, you have to know that this is not a rehearsal as well. It's not like life is going to be this thing when I'm finished with this thing I'm in the middle of. I'm in the middle of this career. I'm in the middle of this marriage. I'm in the middle of this divorce, whatever it is. That's not all of your life. It's this moment, but you're in it. And it's best to be present for it, as opposed to, gee, I wish that never happened. And gee, I don't know what's going to happen. But just to be there for it. And that's enormously difficult for all of us. But becoming aware and also taking inventory of, who have I loved? What am I most proud of? What do I regret? What do I want to be remembered for? If you have people do this in a workshop, it really surfaces this conversation in ways that it's like, everybody's got a relative who doesn't want to write their will. They just don't want to do it. They won't write a will because
Really?
because if they write the will, that means they're accepting that they're going to die one day. And you know, um, Woody Allen's line was death. I get it. It's just not for me. Right. And, Dustin Hoffman's gravestone was, I knew this would happen. Right. So those are the ways we treat the idea that life is finite. So denial is the best way to go. I'm never going to get old. Nothing's really happening to me. Instead, this is a way of actually embracing it and enjoying it. And then starting to think about how do I find new purpose? I had purpose to get this career I got. Now what do I do? So I had a lawyer at one point who said, he was in his 70s and he was still his business card. He was still a lawyer from this, and this was his firm, and it was all great. And he had to come to terms with the fact that we didn't want to do this anymore, but he didn't know how to get his self-worth from anything else.
Right,
So,
exactly.
right. So what we
Yeah.
worked with was mentorship. Because he said, this one young lawyer was told to call me because of my specialty in litigation. So he called and said, I don't really mean to bother you, but this other lawyer told me that you're the guy to talk to. And he got off the phone and he realized, I love that. That was fantastic. So what does he do now? He does less lawyering and more mentoring. And now he doesn't feel like he's just going to get pushed to the side of the parade on the sidewalk. He feels like he walks beside the people who are the next generation and need things. So repurposing yourself is part of the workshop too.
I
And
love that.
yeah, it's fun.
Repurposing yourself.
Yeah, because your purpose when you're 20 is not your purpose at 40. It won't be your purpose at 60. These
No.
things change with your circumstances, right?
What do you think your purpose is right now?
It's a difficult thing to I think it's dealing with what part of what I think I want to do is about my ego, right? Oh,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want people to forget I exist, so I'm going to get involved in. But the other part of it is that I really, what drives me is wanting to make a difference, right? And doing that, there's a lot of different ways to do it. But I tend to think big and then go, okay, wait a minute, just do you really want that? Or do you really just want to make sure you're trying to have an impact? So doing the podcast, doing Not That Kind of Rabbi, is something that really feeds the part of me that is about my spiritual life. Working with people in environmental causes and environmental politics is another thing I like to do. Okay. And I've done a fair bit of since I left the CBC. I've worked with the Green parties federally and provincially. I still do a fair bit of how to communicate these things because, climate change is by far the most important existential issue of our generation and of my children's generation. As a communicator, I'm just constantly thinking, well, then why won't people hear this? Why are they just actually pretending this isn't going on? What is it about this that's so big that people can't wrap their arms around it? And how do we find a way to do something about this? But because it's already too late in many ways, and
It's mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling.
Yes, but maybe that's the problem, is that it's mind-boggling. It's so big that an individual thinks, well, what can I do? And then a 16-year-old girl comes along on the autism spectrum, and millions of people around the world gravitate toward her message. But can we do anything if the game is already rigged?
Right? Did you notice, I know this has been brought up numerous times during the great pause of COVID, but did you notice that when the weather cleared up here in Southern Ontario and it did become the spring and people were still staying indoors or staying at home and the sun would shine and there was not a cloud in the sky? It was like the sky was so blue. It was so gorgeous. I would walk during this time and I would be a lone soul walking for hours and there'd be nobody around. It'd be me and the blue sky. And I thought, wow, this is what the earth would look like if we took care of it.
Right.
It was beautiful.
Right. And the planes stopped
Beautiful.
flying and the
No
cars
plane,
stopped driving. And
none.
yeah, but
Yeah.
how do you reimagine a society when every message around us is, you don't have quite enough just yet. I
Yeah.
know you just got yourself a Lexus, but
Mhm.
maybe you should have actually gotten that Tesla, because, that's where it's at. So if everything tells your children and you that buy, shop, go, you are inadequate, keep going, it's really hard for us to knock this off. Look what happened to work in the pandemic. All those people who had to drive 3 hours a day just to get to work and back are doing it from home. And what have I been
Loving
doing
it.
with my life? What have I
Yeah.
been doing?
Right.
So the game is, for me, a lot of it is structural. But the other part of it is, without a personal change, you're not going to get anywhere. It's like that, what Obama was saying when his first run, you are the change, right?
Mhm.
And Gandhi, you are the change.
Mhm.
Uh, that's the hardest thing for us to do. The rest is, we can talk in big terms, but can we change our internal chemistry and our internal mindfulness into an action that is not about outward reward and accumulation of wealth and fear of scarcity and all these other pieces?
So I read that you had made a big change. You had left the big city. You left Toronto and moved to a much smaller city, Hamilton. And that the quote that I read, that you said Toronto felt too full.
Yeah.
What's
Well,
that about?
that's my hometown.
Toronto
Uh,
or
yeah,
Hamilton?
Toronto.
Yeah.
And when I was growing up, Montreal was a bigger city than Toronto when I was
Yes.
a kid in public school, right?
My dad was from Montreal, and we were always raised to believe that we were not as superior as Montreal was the
No, no,
superior.
no. Montreal, anyone who I worked with at the CBC was from Montreal. They were in exile in Toronto, and
Ah,
we were heathens, and they knew the real life.
that's
So,
right.
yeah. And I said, well, if it was that good, why didn't, you don't need to stay. You can go back to,
Hmm.
heaven if
Hmm.
you'd like. And
Hmm.
they go, no, no, we're good here.
Yep.
No, I grew up in a city that was manageable, that had a scale that was manageable, that on Sundays was closed down, that had a quiet to it that you could get around in.
I remember those days.
Right. And now, 5 years ago, when I really felt the pressure to stop already, it was that everything was about a scarcity of resources and a time, never having enough time. When we first moved to Hamilton, we would know we were going someplace to take one of our children somewhere, and we'd be there 20 minutes early, because it
Ah,
said on the GPS 10 minutes, and we thought, yeah, by helicopter maybe. And then
right.
we drive there in 10 minutes, but we had budgeted for half an hour. So
Right.
it's a path of higher resistance, Toronto, right now. And also, I found that because it was so big, a lot of people really couldn't afford to be nice anymore, or so they thought. They couldn't let you into traffic. They couldn't, wait in line. They couldn't. Everything was just about being crushed,
Hmm.
being pushed into, going to a supermarket, and there's so many people in every single aisle. So it was sort of like Star Trek's Overcrowded Planet,
Yeah.
classic series. So I just felt as well that sort of gave it a spiritual vacancy,
Mm.
right? That people forget that part. I'm busy with the getting by survival part. And
Hmm.
then the unaffordability of it became obscene. All you could talk about at a dinner party was how much your house was worth, but it didn't
Yeah.
matter because you couldn't move up. If it's $1 million house, big deal. The 1,000,003 house that you need is another $300,000 on your mortgage. So it was just getting insane. And in Hamilton, there's 500,000 people. It's a city of scale. People can actually say hello to you as they walk by without it being, oh, hello. I wasn't expecting that. And yes, the thing I miss the most is my dear friends who I spent most of my life with. So I lament that. But in terms of a quality of life, because I have 4 kids, my oldest now lives here. He moved from Toronto because he was in some little condo
Hmm.
with 2 kids. And I have another one who's still in Toronto. But then I have 2 much younger children, and they're in school here. And they're living a life that really is the kind of life people pine for, where you have a nice neighborhood and you walk to school and, you relax more, your nervous system goes down. And so I feel good about all that.
So here's what's not ironic but funny in a way. Two things. One, I know your wife.
Oh yeah.
I believe we grew up together, not too far from each other. We knew each other being in the field as journalists in the early days. And you and Courtney were also neighbors with one of my best friends. So I would see you with, I don't know which kids you had at the time, but on the driveway. And I would be across the street with my son is now 16. So he was like really, I mean, maybe he was a baby, maybe one, but this was on Pinewood.
Right, right.
And I would see you all the time and I'd be like, oh my God, it's Ralph Benmergui. Ralph Benmergui, I want to talk to Ralph Benmergui. I'm like, what? He's married to Courtney. I should just go say hi. But I never did. But I thought it was interesting that I know that part of your life.
Yeah, and that was the last chapter of the Toronto life, right?
That's where you went from Pinewood right to Hamilton.
Yeah, went because enough. I spent 10 years on that street, and before that, it was right downtown. I have a lot of love for the city. Having spent over 50 years in it, I have a lot of love in it.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I worry that it's not a place that's affordable. It's a place, like a lot of cities, it has its villages and its segregations and its class system. And they're getting more and more pronounced because more and more people really can't afford to be there. Mm-hmm. And they're still getting paid obscenely low wages. People who are giving their life. My father and my mother were unionized workers in Toronto. We are immigrants. So I'm very aware, materially and spiritually, about how difficult it is to move to another place in the world with different languages and different things to understand, and your kids really wanting to be part of this new world and you wanting them to remember their world. So for me, I've always had a religious life because I came from that. But the religious life to me is not as important to me as the spiritual life. They're not the same thing. And one should inform the other if you're going to do both. Because I know so many people whose religious experience was completely hollow. It just was like, whatever, go to synagogue with my parents or go to church or go to temples and God was. And but it's empty.
Not fun for
right.
Children. It's poured down their throat, literally. It's like church on Sundays, get up, get dressed, or get up early. You have to go to church. Synagogue, you have to go on the high holidays. You have to, this pretense of everybody looking great and spending hours in shul when all the kids are outside in the hall screaming. So it's like, it's a different experience, I guess, per religion, but it's universal in the fact that if it's forced upon you, you're not going to want to do it as an adult.
When you said with the kids are screaming, I thought, no, that was one of the best things about going to synagogue when I was a kid.
Oh, really?
That we all ran around and
we were not allowed.
Oh God, ours was traditional. We weren't, Hardim are not Orthodox, conservative. Yep. We didn't have any of that. You're either in or you're out.
Well, I was raised Reform, which is interesting. I was raised Reform, but the synagogue I went to was so small that nobody was allowed to go out into the hall. So you had to sit there, So when my friends would tell me that they would go to synagogue and they would spend hours outside just playing with their friends, I thought, how did you get to do that? I didn't get to do that. But in a way, I really appreciated ceremony and all the traditions. And so I didn't get turned off of religion.
Right. And the thing is to ritual has a very valid place in life. And when I totally respect people saying, I'm not doing the religion thing. I get it. It's been dried out for them. It was a pediatric version of the religion. They left it. The old joke is, Rabbi, there's mice. They're in the synagogue. And he goes, okay, don't worry about it. Rabbi, what are you talking about? They're going to eat the Torah, like they're going to eat the parchment. You got to get rid of them. And he goes, you want to get rid of them? Put go make little kippas, little yarmulkes, put them on their heads. Why? He goes, give them a bar mitzvah, you'll never see them again. And that's what happens to a lot of people, is that they give up on this thing because they get to adolescence and they think, you're telling me what?
Yeah.
That this is a bunch of miracles and angels, and there's nothing that makes them present to their experience, and that people carry that throughout the rest of their lives. And I did a TV series for Vision called Five Seekers, where we took 5 people who were spiritually seeking. They'd all given up on their birth religions, but they were yearning for meaning. They wanted something more. It's the Peggy Lee song. Is that all there is?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Is this really all there is?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not enough to just go through this life getting stuff and paying bills and, being friends with this person, but not anymore. And now I'm friend, that's not what life can be.
My husband, my current husband, my second husband, he said to me many years ago, I don't even know what birthday it was, but he said, well, this is as good as it gets.
And
like,
you said,
what? This is it. Like, this is good as it gets. You're not going to feel any better than you feel right now in your life. You probably won't look any better than you look right now in your life. This is the time. So enjoy it. And I thought, oh God, that is so sad. That can't possibly be true.
Yes,
because I'm always looking for better, feeling better, wanting more, feeling more filled up.
But here's the thing. You could say what your husband said to you, to yourself, every single day of your life, and you'd be right.
Which is?
This is as good as it gets. This is it.
Great.
I'll never feel better, look better, be better. If you said it today after we finish this, it'd still be a beautiful person caring about life, wanting to have her children be happy. This is better. This is as good as it's going to get. I have beautiful thoughts and I have gratitude for my life. So I hear what he was saying, and he probably didn't even realize what it would sound like. But gratitude is what we have for our present moment. And the yearning for more can turn into this clinging. In Buddhism, it's clinging and grasping. I'm clinging to what I'm telling everybody I am, and I'm grasping for a future that is better than the one I'm in right now. And those two things constitute samsara, suffering.
Yes, sounds very unhealthy, very unhealthy.
Right, but that's what we do. We just think, this isn't quite it. If I got to do something else with my life. This isn't quite it. I've got to I like this top, but there's a better top. I know I've got a better top because I'm going out now. I want to feel like dressed up because I'm getting crazy with pandemic. And then everything becomes about the material life, and you measure your success as what can I tell people I'm up to, right? And I think that it's the ego drives the first part of our life, drives us through the summer of our life. It gets usually evolves in the youth of our life in a very unskilled way. And then we push our way through, and if we're lucky enough to have the skills, we pull it off. And the privilege, we pull it off, right? And then you're left with, well, I can't keep running on adrenaline fumes. I can't keep running on my ego. What is it that really should be the core of how I live my life from here? And that's spiritual work. And that work is, when you walk and you said you meditate, that presence, that ability to not just be like, oh, what are we going to do for dinner? And,
Exactly.
I got, CRA still needs $1,000 and this is driving me nuts. And so you just walked through the most beautiful grove of trees and didn't look at one of them. Instead, it's just, this is my moment. This is my presence and this is my life. And the gratitude in Judaism, you wake up in the morning and your first, modéani, your first matovu, the first things you do are about gratitude. Thank you for the fact that I'm actually alive this morning and that things work the way they're supposed to. So for the most part, and who I am physically. And then you move to your heart, and then you move to your head, and then you move to things that are unknowable. And that's your ladder of gratitude as you get through it.
Can I ask you something personal?
Sure.
So, and I know you've spoken about this publicly, but it is obviously it's personal. So you have had your scare and experience with cancer.
Hmm.
And so how did you get through that emotionally? Did you turn to Judaism? Did you?
I think, well, I've had it twice.
Twice. Yeah.
Once, in the last few years in a small way. The first one was, the interesting thing about the cancer I had was it was in my nose. And so
Mm.
my nose is not my nose anymore. It's been reconstructed. So I don't look like Ralph Benmergui anymore to people. There are people who look at me and go, they think they know me. I went to the CBC to fill in for a few months of a couple of years ago. And I hadn't seen these people in 12 years. I hadn't been inside the building in 12 years.
Wow.
And I realized I had to identify myself.
Really? People didn't recognize your
Oh
voice?
yeah, people who no, I hadn't spoken yet, but I'd
Oh,
be
okay.
walking by them and they'd look at me, some of them who I'd worked with for years, and they'd be staring at me. And I go, "Hi, Ralph Benmergui," which I never had to do, obviously, when I worked there. People knew who you were because you were on air. And they were like, "Oh, hi," which led to the fact that I'm writing a book now called "I Thought He Was Dead." Because when people haven't seen you in public for years, they think,
Ah,
"Oh, I thought he." Don't you? I do. Somebody gets mentioned on something. I think, "I thought he was dead. Is he
oh
not
gosh.
dead?"
No, I
You
don't
know?
get that. I get, oh, I just saw you on air last
Oh
week.
yeah, no.
Oh.
Wait 10 years. Then it'll be like, oh,
Mhm.
because they haven't seen you publicly for 10 years. They go, "Oh, I thought you were dead." Oh, hi. But the
Wow.
point is, my challenge at that time was two things. One was to not say, "I am cancer,"
Mm.
but instead to say, "I have a cancer,"
Okay.
which really is a big difference.
Yeah, that's a good message.
Because I had a friend who had cancer, and she so identified with her cancer that it obsessed her. Like years of,
I know people like that.
"I'm a cancer survivor. I've battled cancer." I didn't battle anything. Somebody told me I had to do stuff. I did it,
Mhm.
and luckily for me, I got through it. Um, so for me, it was just about the spiritual part was humility, just to
Mhm.
say, this is not some noble get on a horse, attack the cancer with a sword kind of thing. This is just be with these lovely people who are trying to help you. God love all of them. The kindness I received was so wonderful. Uh, and sit with other people in a waiting room for radiation and
Mm.
see that one of them is missing half their jaw because they're fighting for another 10 minutes of their life, right? Because it's not going well. And just to realize the gratitude you should feel that A, you're in their presence and you can just sit with them, but B, that this is what it is. There's, Eckhart Tolle talks about isness. You're in a traffic jam and you think it's everybody's stopping you from getting where you're going. No, you are the traffic jam. Without you, there would be no traffic jam. So you have to sort of accept the isness of things
Mhm.
and then go, okay, I'm not here to be noble or put up a good fight and stiff upper lip. I'm scared at times. Other times I'm just like, you can get through this.
You have to feel it. I always say
Yeah,
that you have to, I guess that's the idea of being present, but instead of burying it way down, it's just be in it, just feel it.
yeah, but to be present is to not project forward as much as you can,
Mhm.
to not project forward to what's going to happen. Oh my God, it's going to turn up. Now that doesn't mean, you're not Buddha.
Mhm.
We've mostly lived unskilled lives, so we end up with just not great tools to deal with really big things. But I come from a family of people who are involved in hospitals in one way or another for most of their lives. So I'm quite clinical. Like when I was
Mhm.
told about it, I didn't freak out. I didn't, oh my God. I just went, what is it called? What is the success rate? What do I have to do now?
How do I get rid of it?
Yeah. Or
Yeah.
will I get rid of it?
Yeah.
And what are you going to do to me? You
Well,
know?
I think you look great. I think you look like Ralph
Thanks.
Benmergui. I do. I think you look like Ralph.
Yeah, well, I don't have my Jewish nose anymore. It's quite thin, you see.
Ah, I see. When you turn.
Yes.
Well, this is a
So
podcast.
it's just like,
I'm
oh
saying,
my, what
yes.
happened to your nose? And I know I've had friends who've gone to other friends afterwards and said, what happened to his face? So that's a real Buddhist meditation in
Okay.
impermanence. I was this guy, and it was like, you know what? Not bad looking. Everything's working out
Yeah.
fine.
You're
Uh,
good looking.
Started at the beginning as a chubby kid, so
Really?
that was how I defined myself.
Wow.
And
Me
then
too, Ralph.
there you go.
Hmm.
And then I became this other guy, and then on TV and all these things, and now I'm this other guy, uh, you know, uh,
The other
who
guy.
who has to accept that, when you get older, it's really diminishing returns physically are normal. That you
Mhm.
can't do everything you used to do. Relative of mine is 10 years older than me. He fell
Oh,
uh, chasing a basketball. He lost momentum going down a hill and broke every finger and dislocated every finger on his left hand.
oh,
Now, when he was
God.
20, he probably would have rolled faster. But at 75, he tried to break his fall. And at 75, your bones are not going to break the fall. They're just going to
Mhm.
break,
That's
right?
terrible.
So yeah, but it's
It is
if
what it
you're,
is.
it
Yeah,
is,
it is
right?
what it is. Yeah.
And
Lucky to
he's
be 75 and alive.
right. And now, the pins are out and it's healing well, and
Mhm.
it's a long process. But for me, I've always looked at the health challenges. A part of them really scare me and keep me up, and the other part of them, I just think this is what this part of life will have more of.
Mhm.
And trying to be really pissed off about it isn't going to do me any good.
No, no, you can't go through life being angry.
Well, you can, and many people do.
No, well, I mean, you can. I'm saying it's just not, that is not probably the good choice. And you're certainly not going to feel very good.
So, where do you think your journey is right now?
Interesting. Well, I feel like it's evolving into where it should be, which is a really nice feeling, really nice feeling. I had a vision about a year ago where what I wanted and where I thought I would be, and it's evolving in this way, on this path,
Hmm.
which seems to coincide with everything else in my life, and it's very interesting because I look at it as another sort of pearl of wisdom. My husband loves to say, be careful what you wish for, because I would say for years to him, I just want to slow down. I don't like this pace. I
Yeah.
don't like not sleeping. I don't like the shift work. I don't like, I would just, and he's like, well, you keep putting your complaints in the complaint box and see where that gets you. Or you make a change. So it's up to you. And so I wished this dream come true, which is have time with myself, my family, focus on their health and my health, because all of it was to shit, literally to shit. Um, so I feel very grateful that it's evolving into where it is right now. And I get to say tonight, as I end my day, and I try to have a little self-reflection at the end of each day now, which is, I spoke to Ralph Benmergui today. And I wouldn't have done that like for a full hour. We just had this fabulous conversation. And I wouldn't have been able to have done that had I been in the same position where I felt stuck doing the same thing day after day, not having the power, the wisdom, and the courage to make a change. So that's where I'm at.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, it's how I feel. It's a great feeling. And I want to share it on this podcast with deeper conversations that are raw, sometimes not comfortable for people. So they listen and they can, and hopefully connect. They don't have to make a change that minute or even that month, but they can take that information and help heal whatever they need healing in them. And every conversation, I hope, will do that for people.
Lovely. part of being a spiritual counselor or director is an awful word for it. Everybody's trying to change it in the business of doing it. But the spiritual counselor is to be able to be engaged in sacred listening,
Hmm.
so that I listen from my heart to your heart, and you speak from your heart into my heart, as opposed to the one up in our head is which is watching you as you're speaking. Yourself, your own self is watching you. How am I doing? Am I doing all right? Is that the right answer? Or should I say, I shouldn't say that. But instead, it's just authenticity in relationship. And that's what spiritual relationship is really about. It's not, religion is a fitness program. Spirituality is an intention that is based on profound relationship. It's a great book Martin Buber wrote called I and Thou. It's really short and it's really brilliant. And it's
Okay.
really about how most of our relationships are I and it. What use is Dana to me right now? So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, all those parties we used to go to when we were the media types, and people would look over our shoulder at somebody who might have more benefit to them.
Oh,
You know,
goodness.
the film festival party where someone's like, oh, you're in news. Anyways, I go looking for someone, and oh, there's, you know,
Oh, when the
Gian.
film festival was real,
Yeah, well,
I stopped going to the parties.
real to a degree.
Well,
Right,
I
but
stopped going. I stopped going. I stopped going.
right. So what happens is everybody's commodified. Everybody is what use are they to each other.
Yeah.
That's an I and it relationship.
Mm-hmm.
The car dealer sees me coming and thinks, oh, maybe this guy will buy a car, but he's older, and older people are much pickier. And if we sell him a car, it'll only be one or two from here to the end. If his 30-year-old son comes in here, he's going to buy 4 or 5 cars. So I really wanted to become a Toyota guy. So that's I and it. I and thou is who's standing in front of me and who am I standing in front of them, and having a sincere conversation. So in spiritual counseling, that you try to start there by developing that relationship so that we can spare ourselves the presentational talk of who we want people to see us as, and move more towards this life thing. It's nuts.
It
I'm
is
not,
nuts.
of course, but that's the beautiful part of
I
it. So
know.
I
It's
love
nuts.
it.
It's
Just
nuts.
stay confused. To be
Mhm.
certain, to be uncertain is uncomfortable. To be certain is ridiculous,
I love that.
right? What's the point? I
I
mean,
love that, Ralph. I love that. I love that. I'm grateful we had this conversation today. I want to know where people can find you.
they can find me at, well, my website is Kavanah, which in Hebrew is intention, KAVANAH.ca. If they were looking for spiritual counseling or spiritual direction, that's where you'd go to say, hey, I'm interested. And aging to saging workshops. I stopped for a while, but we'll start back up again soon. And if they want to listen to my podcast, it's Not That Kind of Rabbi. Just literally Google Not That Kind of Rabbi, and all the podcatchers will come up, and you can just listen on Stitcher or Apple or whoever you want.
It's so good. Telling everyone go listen to it. It's so good. I cannot wait to hear a new episode. I'm excited. Do you have a new episode?
You know, Mike and I have to talk about that because
Mm.
last week I got one at the last minute,
Mm.
um,
Okay.
which we put out, which was great. She was really interesting. But I got one with Zane Kaplansky from
Mhm.
Kaplansky's Deli, which is really good,
I
really
heard it.
interesting.
I
Yeah,
heard it.
he was
Great.
great.
Yeah, it was great. It was so good.
Yes. So yeah, there's about 34 of them up there now. So if anybody wants to check it out, we'll have another one this
Check
week.
it out. Absolutely check it out. And I'm going to continue to listen and follow you. And Shana Tova to you and to your family.
Shana Tova, have a
Thank
sweet
you.
year.
You too. And thank you so much for speaking to me for so long. This is so joyful.
My pleasure, and I love what you're doing, and
Thank you, Ralph.
may you continue to grow in love and happiness.
Thank you, Ralph. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right, take care.
You too.